But I am going to introduce the first speaker. Taj Hassan is a president of a small college called the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, who are changing the world in a way I wish the surgical colleges were. And he has come to talk to us about the future dystopian emergency medicine. Taj Hassan.
Thank you so much, Ross. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm desperately hoping you'll choose Transformer rather than McDonald's employee, but I think Ross is going to tell you later on. Anyway, so it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm really grateful for the invitation to Ross and to Tessa and to Grace. Grace especially, who's transformed my slides. And I was actually, I said to her, you now know them so well, you should just don't do it. You cut out the middleman. So anyway, it's fantastic to be here. This is what I'm going to talk about. It's a brilliant title that I was given. I am not bright enough to come up with something as clever as that. So I hope the next 17 minutes will highlight for you three things. I want to talk to you about defining moments in your life. I want to talk to you about managing dystopia. And I really want to talk to you a fair bit about framing utopia, because that's what we all aspire to and want to be. This is the Leeds General Infirmary. I've been a consultant there for the last 20 years. It feels a bit old. And Leeds is a great place. How many people have been to Leeds? Awesome, amazing. And most of you have probably related to three F words, that sort of flat caps, ferrets, and foul weather. And 14 years ago, when I was trying to convince my wife to move from London to Leeds to marry me, she had those three F words. And I said, I want you to scrape all that away and come up with a much better mental model, which is that Leeds is the Milan of the North. And amazingly, she laughed, just like you. But I did convince her. So anyway, we've got 3 kids now, and she's got to stay. Although she has many moments. Anyway, enough of that. So the sun shines constantly, and it is a fantastic place to work. And there is a Leeds contingent who are known by their sartorial elegance because they're from Milan. Okay, so dystopia is defined as a bad place, and isn't that terrible? I first did emergency medicine 32 years ago, and people said, "Gosh, why do you want to do A&E? It's a bad place to be." And I was like, "No, it's fantastic. It's amazing." And seemingly, 32 years later, for a variety of reasons, people still regard emergency departments as bad places, crowded places, at times frightening places for a whole variety of reasons. And I want you to sort of change that image. And part of the reason I suppose people regard them as bad places is because we are the canary in the mine. We sit at the very heart of a hugely complex urgent and emergency care system. So when we become crowded, it's because often other parts of the system are dysfunctional or failing. And we spend a huge amount of money on healthcare in the NHS. In England alone, is £130 billion. And some of you will remember back in 2012, they came up with this grand plan. NHS England are fantastic people. They're incredibly talented. And they came up with a grand plan which said the 5-year forward view is going to save £20 billion over the next 5 years, because that's what we have to do. And then 5 years later, they've now come up with the NHS long-term plan in which they are going to invest £20 billion. And I was trying to explain this concept to my wife and my 11-year-old daughter. Kids love listening. My 11-year-old daughter was listening to this, and she said, "I don't understand." I said, why are they took 20 billion away, and now they're going to give you 20 billion, Daddy? Isn't that, well, why don't they listen to you? I've seen you on telly. You're constantly asking for more beds. I said, well, thank you, Eleanor. That's really helpful. She said, I tell you what I'll do, Daddy. I'll write to the Prime Minister. It's true. Thankfully, I stopped her. Well, maybe I shouldn't have done. Anyway, so 4% is what they've agreed that they're going to invest in our health service for the next 5 years. Actually, the reality is that the long-term average is 3.4%. So seemingly, it was above the average. That's fantastic. But when the real work has been done by economists, the real spend is going to be 3.1% per year for the next 5 years. So the reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that actually it's going to be tough for the next 5 years, okay? And that's important that you know that if you're living in England, and it's actually probably a bit worse in Wales and other places. And we've done a lot of work around standards in emergency care. So we've got a college view, we've got an NHS England and improvement view. And we have actually agreed that we need to have a common agreed set of flow metrics, as the system is reliant upon everybody having ownership of what is important in emergency care. And so we continue to liaise with them. And I think actually compared to other work, so I was in Australia last year and talking to Simon Judkins, the president of the Australian College, and much as the streets are paved with gold in Australia, seemingly, Simon told me that's not true, that actually it's quite tough. I was in Canada, and they were telling me it's actually quite tough. When you look at emergency care system performance, the UK is doing pretty well. But it still feels a tough place to be, a dystopic place to be. And when you have to try and describe it, as I do, to people like journalists or politicians or policymakers, and if you've done a tough night shift, as I had done when I wrote this tweet, or a tough late shift, you feel pretty emotionally traumatized. And some of that language is reflective of that. And so how do you convince people that actually it's a fantastic specialty and we're just going through tough times? And actually the reality is those tough times may carry on for some while. And how do you up your game as a leader nationally, or as a leader of your emergency department or your pediatric emergency department, or just actually running the shift as a junior registrar with the boss? How do you keep your game up and running? And you're affected by these defining moments, and we probably all have defining moments in our lives. And emergency medicine's amazing because you can have quite a few of them over 8 hours. Okay, do you get that feeling? I don't know how many of you remember your earliest memory. Yeah, your earliest memory, was it because somebody lost your teddy bear, or you got a slobbering kiss from your grandmother, so my earliest memory actually was my cousin. It was actually exactly 50 years ago. 50 years ago, I was being brought up in a small rural village in Pakistan, and my 5-year-old cousin got upset with me, and I was 5.5, and he threw a brick at me. And when bricks are thrown at you, it was just quite a small brick, but and the only way I felt the need to arrest its journey was with my head. And there was sort of blood pouring down. I think I was knocked unconscious for a while. And my grandmother, who's an expert in pediatric emergency medicine, wrapped it up and said I was okay. And I was sleepy for a couple of days, and it was a real defining moment, and that's why I wanted it to emergency medicine. So I link that to, we all live in a tough world, but actually if you look at the world map, and this is a map of under 5 mortality, back in 2010, it was just one that I found, and look at the disparity, and we know, and you probably had a great talk from Shweta yesterday around some of the disparities around what is happening around the world, but actually what is changing, and what is remarkable about the change is, for example, the WHO only a couple of months ago defined the importance of emergency and trauma care. So they will hold countries to account. And they said in that statement, all member states, regardless of available resources, can take steps towards strengthening their emergency care systems. That is a big deal. That document is a really big deal. If you haven't seen it, please go and find it on the web, and it's fantastic. And it will allow people who want to invest in and level the playing field as being really important. Childlife Foundation are an amazing organization in Karachi, and I met their chief executive a few months ago. They've got 25 million people. 8 years ago, they decided that they wanted to make emergency care for children safer in Karachi and have no sick child more than 30 minutes away from a pediatric emergency department. And through charity work, they've opened 7 pediatric emergency departments in Karachi. And I could give you an entire lecture on that alone, but I have 8 minutes, so I can't. But it's an amazing organization. It just shows that with the will, you can find a way to level the playing field. So framing utopia, here are what I believe. So my central thesis to you is that we don't live in a dystopic world. 32 years after I first started emergency medicine, and much as it's my position as a college president, I truly believe we are entering the golden age of emergency care. So whether you're a pediatrician, pediatric emergency medicine, or adult and pediatrics, actually I'm not adult and pediatrics, as my colleagues in the audience from Leeds will tell you. I feel distinctly uncomfortable nowadays working in the pediatric emergency department, but they take good care of me, so that's good. So here are my top 7 leadership actions that I think you should, whether you're a junior trainee, a senior trainee, a clinical director, or whether you aspire to be the president of your college. These are the things that you should think about. You're amazing. You do all sorts of different things. You're not just a physician, okay? And the great talent about doing all these different things is that it maintains that variety and that spice and ability to apply your skills across different domains. You have many positive defining moments, the way you interact with a patient. It's not about doing an RSI or a thoracotomy or pulling a shoulder back. It's about how you interact with that next patient, about how you care for your trainee, about how you care for one of the nursing staff, or perhaps one of the porters who's not looking too well. Number 1, speak truth to power. So my job is to go around speaking truth to power to politicians and policymakers. This was a strategy that we employed last year to try and raise the profile of safety in emergency departments. It doesn't really matter what level you're functioning at. Even if you're a junior trainee, connect to your more senior person. Even you might want to connect to somebody senior in the hospital. Speak truth to power. Do it consistently, cogently, coherently, constructively, but make sure you do it. If you're going to, number 2, transform in bite sizes, okay? So you can have amazing documents such as standards for children in emergency care, or choosing wisely how we apply our resources. If you cut that up into bite sizes for your department and say, what are we going to try and achieve in the next 12 months? What is our game plan for raising standards in our emergency department? How are we going to interact with our patients better? What is our 12-month plan? Number 3, achieve shared vision. At the heart of all this is the need to make sure that our staffing strategies are right. This was something we published back last year. And one of the key things for us as a Royal College was to be able to say we need enough depth and breadth of cover. We need senior decision makers through 16 hours minimum, 24 hours in big centres. But we need them also at times of surge for them to be 2 or 3 people at a time. And we need to make sure that the intensity of their work is recognized so they have time to rest, recover, and recuperate. It seems really obvious, but actually it's about saying that consistently. People say, oh, nobody wants to go into emergency medicine, Taj. So this is GMC data. Okay, they're our regulator in the UK. The number of consultants on the specialist register in emergency medicine is the fastest rising. In over the last 6 years, 32% increase in EM consultants. That's fantastic. It's really good. 4, value the training journey. I talk about each one of those for an hour, okay? But Ross is looking upset, so, okay. But there are many things that trainees nowadays, most of us got thrown into the deep end of this quagmire, but that was just the way it was. These are absolutely all the right things that we should be aspiring to do for our trainees to make it a better world for them so that they can flourish, okay? The tools of leadership I put down there, EM Leaders, is a fantastic program that we're beginning to roll out, which will hopefully give dedicated leadership training to every single trainee through every single year of their training. I think we'll be the first college to do that, hopefully the first EM program. Doctors in training. So the pipeline is amazing. Look at this, 143% rise in the last 6 years in the number of trainees going into emergency medicine. People desperately want to do emergency medicine, and that's fantastic. It's how we care for them while they're in there, which is also really important. Look at the other numbers of the other specialties in comparison. Emergency medicine is way ahead. It's fantastic. It's great. But actually caring for them is vitally important. Plan your workforce. It's a multidisciplinary workforce. We are made up of fantastic people, ACPs, physicians associates, a host of other people. But again, that depth and breadth argument is important. Well-being, system responsibilities of well-being. We all want to be in the blue zone, high performing. We don't want to be in the red zone, okay? Reality is you can go from the blue zone to the red zone in an 8-hour shift. Yeah? And how do we stay well? Dunn's model is really good. We know that who we are, personalities and temperaments affect us, and that can influence it. We're also affected by a whole host of negative inputs. Tate Shanafelt said, it's not about all these things, about getting people to eat granola and do yoga. It's about actually how the system cares for them. That's what's important. And the college has produced some fantastic documents in this. Look at those. Many of you will have seen these. But how you slice and dice that up to make it meaningful for your department is really important. Number 6, learn to look up. It doesn't matter, when you're caught in the midst of the storm, but actually being able to stand back and really learning to look up and be proud of whatever specialty you're in. Number 6 is the power of technology. I'm down to my last 15 seconds, but I will say that technology is transforming our lives, and it's fantastic. We need to make sure that we get engaged. And the last one, I'm only going to be a minute late, Ross, I promise. So I met a guy called SHAWN 7 years ago, and he writes this amazing book called The Happiness Advantage. And he said, you're incredibly lucky, Taj. You're incredibly lucky as an emergency physician. You meet all these people, and every day, all you do is you get to be kind to them. And his 7 principles are all about, number 1 is be kind. Because there's nothing more energizing than looking in somebody's eyes and spending an extra 3 minutes at the end with them, that patient, and saying, actually, I'm going to take really good care of you. And the energizing look that they give back to you. So being kind is really important. So those are my 7 things, and I think they apply to absolutely every single person in this room, that you can transform, change in your own ways. And I was trying to think of which American president's quote I was going to use. And I chose this one because I've got lots of heroes in my life, and he comes second, actually. My father is my first hero for a whole host of reasons. But Obama said, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change we seek. So we all can change, and I hope some of my words have resonated well with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we just leave those slides? I think we'll just leave that up whilst we take questions, because I think that's a beautiful quote, and I do want to thank Taj for that, because sometimes we have a view of the future as horribly dystopian, and it's because of people like this that the future will not be dystopian, and it's something we should be proud of. Now, I didn't introduce Nikki Abela, who's the Twitter moderator. She has taken some questions. If you'd like to ask questions from the floor, that's great. It's on Twitter. We already have 2 questions to start with. For Taj, Nikki will go with those.
Yes. So one question is from Norwich Pem, who asked, recruitment to A&E is a bit of a rags to riches story in the last few years. Given that recruitment to general pediatric training is suffering at a national level, what were the big factors in the turnaround, and how can we improve things?
Oh,
That's a little
thanks.
question.
That was so easy. So the question was mainly about general pediatric training and how to transform it.
What transformed A&E numbers, recruitment, so that they can translate that to the pediatrics?
Okay. Well, I think the Royal College of Child Health, Pediatric and Child Health, have done fantastic work in the last few years. I think we've been on a particular journey in emergency medicine for this, probably the last 6 to 8 years I've been involved in college. And I think some of the things I highlighted in there, the ability to get a shared vision with policymakers and politicians is absolutely key. The ability to make sure that you have something to march towards in terms of a model of practice. And also the ability to describe clearly why it's so stimulating. And I think for both specialties, emergency medicine and pediatrics, it's both things absolutely apply. So I think those are some of the key ingredients.
Jennifer at Coffee Headaches asked if there's a 143% increase in doctors starting EM training, but only a 32% increase in ED consultants. Does that mean that there's a very high attrition rate during training, or does it just mean that we're waiting for the rise?
So I think that's reflective of more people in the pipeline. Mm-hmm. I think the attrition rate issue, obviously when I live my world on Twitter, is a bit different to when I live my world in the real world. Well, that wasn't disparaging, sorry. I think attrition rates have come down. It was bad 6 or 8 years ago. It has steadily improved. We've just done some stats. At the moment, our attrition rate last year was that we're losing about 5% per year. That is still too many. People are also changing specialties. I probably changed about 4 times during my training. I was desperate to be a GP. I couldn't, So I think you have to allow junior doctors to change their minds.
Yeah.
But I think the more we track that progress, the better it will be.
There's also a question, but I think this deserves a book to be written about how you went from a McDonald's employee to Arkham president.
Somebody snitched.
Wasn't me.
So I don't think we have enough time for that.
Oh, good.
But certainly coming to the end of your term, I'd just like to take this time to thank you for all the work you've done.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Taj.